You've got your DD 214, you've got your personnel file, you know exactly when and where you served. So when a VA claim gets denied or an evidence request comes back asking for more, a lot of veterans get stuck on the same question. What more do they want? I already proved I was there. Here's the problem: proving you were there and proving what happened while you were there are not the same thing. And mixing those two up is one of the quietest ways a strong looking claim still comes up short. Not because you did anything wrong, not because you were careless, because nobody ever sat you down and explained that the value of a piece of evidence starts with what it actually documents, not what we assume it proves. A DD 214 can absolutely establish real important facts about your service, but don't assume that because it's sitting in your file, it automatically establishes the specific event, injury, exposure, or circumstance you're claiming. Read what it actually says, then ask what it actually proves. So, in this lesson, we're going to build one repeatable skill. Name the fact you're trying to establish. Then ask what evidence in your file actually speaks to that fact, not what documents you're supposed to collect, not a checklist. A way of thinking you can run on every piece of paper in your claim. Last lesson, we talked about what your medical evidence actually has to do, prove the diagnosis, the severity, and the current symptoms. That's one leg of the stool. This lesson is a different leg entirely. What evidence establishes that the relevant event, injury, disease, exposure, or circumstance actually happened during your service? Here's the line I want you to remember: proof you were there is not always proof of what happened there. Quick note before we go further: when I say in service event in this lesson, I don't just mean one dramatic incident, an accident, an explosion, one bad day. It covers any relevant event, injury, disease, exposure, symptom or history, or circumstance of your service. Something that happened once, something that happened repeatedly over months, an exposure nobody ever wrote an incident report about. All of it falls under the same umbrella. Myth one, myth my DD 214 proves what happened. Here's the rule: a DD 214 can establish important facts about your service, but don't assume that because it's in your file, it automatically establishes the specific fact your claim depends on. Start by reading what's actually documented on it. Say a veteran's DD 214 shows 11 months in a combat zone. That fact may matter a great deal, but by itself, it doesn't tell you whether a specific injury happened during that time, what that injury was, or when it happened. Before you assume a document covers your claim, ask, what does this actually prove? Myth two, myth: if I served there, I don't need to figure out what my records establish. Certain laws and presumptions can change what a veteran has to establish in specific circumstances. That's its own topic with its own rules, and we're not covering it here. What doesn't change no matter what is the habit itself. Ask what fact you're trying to establish and what evidence in your file actually speaks to it. Myth three, myth: if it's not in my personnel file, it didn't happen. Evidence about a specific in service fact often lives somewhere other than your personnel file: service treatment records, unit logs, incident reports, witness statements. Veterans stop looking too soon because they check one folder and assume that's the whole picture. Look everywhere. The fact could be documented, not just where you'd expect a personnel record to be. Myth four, myth: my own account doesn't count unless someone backs it up. Your own statement is evidence when you're describing something you personally observed or experienced. How much weight it carries depends on the facts, and the rest of your record and other supporting evidence can strengthen it. We're only introducing that idea here. Lesson 6 goes deep on buddy statements and lay evidence specifically. That sounds small. It isn't. Because if you think your own statement counts for nothing, you might not even write it down, and that's evidence you just left on the table. Here's the framework. Every piece of evidence in your file gets tested against two questions. 1, does this help establish where or when I served? 2, does this help establish what happened, what condition or circumstance existed, or the specific fact I'm trying to prove? General service evidence isn't unimportant. It matters a lot, actually. The point isn't to throw it out. The point is to stop assuming it automatically covers more ground than it does. Here's the process. I want you to actually run this on your own file after this video. Step 1. What fact am I trying to establish? Maybe it's where or when you served. Maybe it's a specific injury, treatment you received, an incident, an exposure or circumstance, a symptom you noticed at the time, something another person witnessed. Step 2. What evidence in my file actually speaks to that fact? That could be service treatment records, personnel or service records, unit or official records, incident or accident reports, awards or decorations when they're actually relevant to the fact at issue, your own statement, a buddy or witness statement, or something else entirely. And here's the trap to avoid completely. Don't turn this into a checklist of documents I need. The same piece of paper can speak to more than one fact. A single service treatment record might establish where you were stationed and describe an injury in the same paragraph. The question isn't what kind of document this is. The question is, what fact does this piece of evidence actually establish? Let's run this through an example. This is a composite, not a real veteran, not a real claim, just a way to see the reasoning in action. A veteran is filing a claim related to a shoulder injury they believe happened while loading equipment during a field exercise. Here's what's sitting in the file, DD 214. What does this actually prove? Start by reading what's actually documented on it. Depending on what's recorded there, it may establish real facts about the veteran's service, but don't assume it automatically establishes the shoulder injury we're examining here. Ask, does anything on this document actually speak to that fact? Deployment or personnel orders. What does this actually prove? Read what's actually on them. They may help establish where and when the veteran was stationed, but that alone doesn't tell us whether the shoulder injury happened. Ask whether anything in the orders actually speaks to that fact, or whether they only establish the surrounding circumstances. A service treatment record from that time period. What does this actually prove? Again, it depends on what's actually written in it. If this particular record documents shoulder complaints, treatment, an exam, or a description of what happened, those entries may speak directly to the fact at issue, the injury itself, a unit training log. What does this actually prove? If this particular log documents the field exercise, it may help establish surrounding facts, when and where the exercise happened. Then ask whether anything in that record speaks more directly to the claimed injury, or whether it only places the veteran at the scene, the veteran's own statement. What does this actually prove? Read what it actually describes. If it addresses what happened, how it happened, and what it felt like at the time, it's evidence of the fact at issue. Its weight depends on the rest of the picture, but it's not nothing. A buddy statement from someone who was on that exercise. What does this actually prove? Evaluate what that witness actually observed or personally knows. If they describe seeing the injury happen or remember the veteran being in pain afterward, that's evidence directly addressing what happened, not just general service. Notice what we just did. We didn't ask which documents we're supposed to have. We took what's actually in the file and asked, one piece at a time, what does this actually prove? Before the next lesson, do this. Write down the specific in-service fact you're trying to establish for your own claim. Not I served, but the actual event, injury, exposure, or circumstance. Then go through what you currently have and ask piece by piece. What does this actually prove? Does it show where or when I served? Does it speak to what happened, or both? If everything you have only answers the first question, that's worth knowing now, not after you've already filed. So here's where we've landed. Proving you served and proving what happened during that service are two different jobs. General service evidence matters, but it doesn't automatically cover the specific fact you're trying to establish. Name the fact, then ask what evidence actually speaks to it. Once you can do that, once you know what your medical evidence shows and you know what evidence supports the in-service fact, there's one more piece, the piece that connects them. That's the nexus opinion, and it's the piece most claims are still missing. That's next. Before then, Go to veteranclaimsmadeeasy.com/resources. That's where you'll find the evidence blueprint workbook, including the section built specifically for sorting service evidence from event evidence in your own file. Quick reminder, this is educational information only. It's not legal advice, medical advice, or accredited VA representation, and it's not a guarantee of any outcome. The goal is to help you understand your own file more clearly. My goal is never to mislead, only to empower you with accurate, honest, and actionable information. Semper Fidelis, and God bless.